Chosen one, before you explain this away, before the part of you that has learned to doubt tries to make this feel ordinary, stay with the feeling that brought you here. Something in you paused when you saw these words. Something recognized a familiar signal before your mind had time to analyze it. Messages cross the paths of thousands of people every day, yet only a few feel that quiet pull that says, "Pay attention." If you're still here, there is a reason for that. Many people will hear these words and move on without a second thought. They will continue with their day exactly as they were before, and that is perfectly fine. But something about this landed differently for you. Maybe it was difficult to explain. Maybe it was only a feeling. Yet some part of you knew there was something here worth listening to, and that recognition matters more than you realize. Most people spend their lives following paths they never consciously chose. They learn what is expected. They fit themselves into familiar shapes, and they slowly stop asking the deeper questions. But you have never been fully comfortable living that way. Even during the seasons when you tried to convince yourself that ordinary was enough, there was always a quiet voice beneath the noise. It kept returning. It kept reminding you that there was something about your life you had not understood yet. And I think that voice has been telling you the truth for a very long time. The people around you may have seen pieces of who you are, but rarely the whole picture. They noticed how deeply you think and called it overthinking. They noticed how much you feel and called it sensitivity. They saw your reactions, your questions, your intensity, but they never saw the weight behind them. They never saw how exhausting it can be to notice things others overlook, or how lonely it feels when experiences that stay with you for years are forgotten by everyone else before the day ends. You have carried questions that followed you into quiet rooms. You have smiled through conversations while feeling disconnected from the life you were expected to want. There may even have been moments when you looked at the person you thought you would become by now and felt a private sadness you rarely shared with anyone. You learned how to be the strong one so early that few people noticed when you started getting tired. And beneath all of that, something inside you kept waiting. Waiting for permission to stop shrinking. Waiting to stop performing the version of yourself that felt acceptable. Waiting for someone to put words around what you have sensed your entire life. You are not too much. You are not difficult to understand because something is wrong with you. You have been carrying a depth of awareness that many people never learn how to recognize, even within themselves. The confusion was real. The feeling of standing in a crowded room and still feeling separate was real. The sense that you never fully belonged inside the story everyone else seemed comfortable living was real. Yet what if those feelings were never evidence that you were broken? What if they were evidence that your path was asking something different from you? Think about the moments that changed you. Think about the losses that left you staring at the ceiling late at night, wondering how life could possibly move forward. Think about the seasons when everything seemed to unravel at once, and no amount of effort appeared to change anything. Most people look at those chapters and assume they were interruptions. But some experiences arrive to shape a person, not stop them. You have spent more time in the fire than you realize. Throughout history, the people who carried something meaningful often disappeared into seasons that looked like failure from the outside. They watched others move ahead while they remained unseen. They endured years that felt forgotten. Yet those hidden years were never empty. They were where depth was formed. They were where endurance took root. They were where the foundation was quietly being laid. Some seasons were never punishment. They were winter. And winter has never been the end of anything alive. The people who receive everything quickly often reach the limits of what they can hold just as quickly. Depth grows differently. Depth is built through waiting, through uncertainty, through the moments when you continue even after part of you wants to stop. The experiences you once called deprivation may have been preparing capacities that comfort never could. You know the ache I am talking about. You know what it feels like to watch others receive opportunities you prayed for. You know what it feels like to carry a sense of purpose you cannot fully explain, while the world around you seems uninterested in it. And perhaps the hardest part was never the waiting itself. Perhaps it was wondering whether the thing you felt inside was real at all. There were moments when you stopped asking whether the world was wrong and started wondering whether you were. Yet the ache remained. Because people who carry nothing rarely wrestle with purpose. They rarely feel that quiet tension between who they are and who they know they are becoming. The longing you have felt is not evidence against you. It is evidence of something still alive inside you. The resilience you built, often without noticing it, has become part of who you are. Those scars are not disqualifications. They are proof of what you survived. And lately, something has been changing. You may not have had words for it yet, but you have felt it. Certain distractions no longer hold your attention the way they once did. Thoughts arrive that seem clearer than before. A memory keeps returning for reasons you cannot fully explain. There is a restlessness in you, but it feels different from anxiety. It feels more like movement, as though something that has been sleeping inside you is beginning to open its eyes. The timing of this message matters more than you think. When a season is coming to an end, signs often appear before explanations do. The inner knowing becomes harder to ignore. The pull toward what is true grows stronger. The things that once felt important begin losing their grip. And if any part of this feels familiar, trust that feeling. Because what you are sensing is not random. Something within you has been preparing for a very long time, and the closer you move toward what is next, the harder it becomes to pretend you cannot feel it anymore. And lately, the things that once kept your attention have started losing their hold on you. The distractions that used to fill the empty spaces no longer feel the same, and you may not have fully understood why. If you have noticed a shift in your inner world, a subtle change in how you see yourself, your future, or the life around you, trust that experience. Something is moving beneath the surface, and your whole being seems to sense it before your mind can explain it. What if the parts of your story you have spent years trying to outrun were never mistakes at all? What if the chapters that embarrassed you, the seasons that felt directionless, and the roads you wished you could erase were actually leading you somewhere essential? Sometimes the experiences we resist most fiercely carry the exact lessons we were meant to uncover. Sometimes what looks like wandering is the path itself. There has always been something inside you that refused to give up completely. Even during the nights when your hope felt thin and your certainty disappeared, some quiet part of you kept whispering, "Keep going." You may have doubted your future. You may have doubted yourself. Yet something deeper than doubt continued to hold its ground. The people who eventually change their lives in meaningful ways are rarely identified by how easy their journey was. More often, they are recognized by their willingness to continue when continuing no longer made sense. They are the ones who survived seasons that should have emptied them and somehow emerged with their spirit still intact. Not untouched, not unscarred, but still carrying a light that refused to go out. You know what that feels like because you have lived it. There were moments when you questioned everything. Moments when you looked at the darkness honestly and could not pretend it wasn't there. Yet even then, you kept taking the next step. You kept showing up. You kept moving forward while carrying questions you could not answer. That combination matters more than you know. Anyone can keep going when the path is clear. What reveals something deeper is the ability to keep moving while uncertainty sits beside you. To carry pain without letting it define you. To experience confusion without abandoning yourself. If that sounds familiar, then you possess a kind of resilience the world rarely acknowledges, but history quietly remembers. And because of that, what comes next is not another season of endless waiting. It is recognition. Before we go further, there is something important you need to understand. Every tradition that spoke about awakening also warned about imitation. Not because evil forces were hiding around every corner, but because human longing can be easily misdirected. The deeper your hunger for purpose, the easier it becomes to mistake movement for progress and promises for truth. You have probably encountered this before. A path that felt certain until it wasn't. An opportunity that seemed like the answer until you realized it left you exactly where you started. Maybe you invested your heart into something because it sounded like the life you were searching for, only to discover that it could imitate transformation without ever creating it. That is the nature of a false arrival. It offers relief before growth. It offers certainty before wisdom. It offers the appearance of becoming without asking you to become anything at all. And for people who have spent years searching for meaning, that temptation can be powerful because it speaks directly to the ache they carry. The danger is not that you lose your way once. The danger is that repeated disappointments teach you to stop trusting yourself. Every time something promises fulfillment and leaves you empty, a small voice begins asking whether your deeper knowing can be trusted at all. Over time, that doubt can become louder than the truth you once felt so clearly. This is why recognition always comes before transformation. You cannot step fully into something you still believe might be an illusion. You cannot trust what has spent years being questioned, dismissed, or explained away. Before anything changes externally, something must be acknowledged internally. You must recognize that what you have sensed all these years has been real. So hear this clearly. The difficulty of your path was never evidence that you were moving in the wrong direction. The struggle did not mean you were abandoned. The delays did not mean you were forgotten. Many of the things that seemed to oppose you were shaping capacities you could not have developed any other way. And perhaps that is why these words are finding you now. Not because this moment is convenient, not because life has suddenly become easy, but because you have reached a point where the old explanations no longer fit. The version of yourself that kept surviving every difficult season is beginning to understand something the struggling version could not yet see. This is the beginning of recognition. Throughout history, there has always been a quieter thread running beneath the visible world. It rarely moved through institutions, titles, or positions of power. It moved through ordinary people who carried something extraordinary within them. People who appeared at the right moment, in the right place, and changed far more than anyone realized at the time. The people who quietly changed the course of history rarely looked extraordinary from the outside. Many were doubted. Many were overlooked. Some spent years feeling invisible to the very world they were helping shape. Yet across different cultures, centuries, and traditions, stories kept appearing about individuals who carried something difficult to explain, but impossible to ignore. The names were different depending on where you looked. Some called it the divine spark. Others spoke of an inner light, a sacred inheritance, or a gift carried from birth. The language changed, but the pattern remained remarkably similar. There was always the idea that certain people arrived carrying something within them long before they understood it themselves. And perhaps that is why so many of them spent years questioning their own experience. A gift that fully reveals itself before its time often attracts attention before it has developed the strength to endure it. So life has a way of protecting what is still growing. What feels like delay is sometimes preservation. What feels like being overlooked is sometimes the quiet season where something valuable is learning how to survive. When you look closely at many spiritual traditions, you find the same theme appearing again and again. Certain teachers were believed to pass on understanding in ways that went beyond information. People would encounter them and leave changed without fully knowing why. Something would awaken before it could be explained. The experience arrived first, the language came later. Across different cultures, the descriptions were surprisingly similar. They spoke of awakening, illumination, inner presence, and direct knowing. Not as beliefs that someone adopted, but as experiences that seemed to emerge when a person reached a certain level of readiness. The teachers themselves understood something important. They could not force that moment into existence. They could only recognize when someone was prepared for it. For generations, this understanding was preserved quietly. It moved through mentors and students, through stories layered with deeper meanings, through families and traditions that carried fragments of the knowledge forward, even when much of the world forgot why it mattered. The forms changed, but the central idea endured because people kept witnessing the same thing happen. Today, some of those same questions are being explored from a very different direction. Researchers studying the mind continue discovering that human potential is far greater than most people were ever taught to believe. There are capacities built into us that often remain dormant, not because they are absent, but because they are never fully accessed. Think about a room in a house that has always belonged to you, yet you have never opened the door. The room exists, the space is there, everything it contains has always been yours, yet without the key, it remains part of your life only in theory. Many ancient traditions described human potential in a similar way. They spoke of hidden gifts, unopened chambers, and capacities waiting beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. What makes this deeply personal is who tends to carry the strongest potential for that awakening. It is rarely the people who have lived the easiest lives. More often it is those who have endured uncertainty, disappointment, and long seasons of waiting. The people who learned resilience because they had no other choice. The people who carried questions for years without finding satisfying answers. The people who continued searching even when part of them wanted to stop. That is why your story matters. Some of the pressure you experienced was shaping strength you could not see at the time. Some of the waiting was preparing levels of depth that comfort alone could never produce. Looking back, there may be chapters that still feel confusing, but confusion does not erase purpose. Sometimes preparation only becomes visible after it has already done its work. And that brings us to this moment, not 6 months ago, not years from now. Now. There is a reason these ideas are landing differently today than they would have at another point in your life. Something in you has reached a place where it can finally recognize what earlier versions of yourself could only sense. The waiting has created a kind of readiness, even if you have not fully trusted that readiness yet. So I want to speak to the deepest part of you for a moment. Not the part that handles responsibilities, not the part that gets through the day and does what needs to be done. I mean the quieter part, the one that stayed alive beneath every disappointment, the one that kept believing there was more to your story even when the evidence seemed to point in the opposite direction. That part of you has not been wrong. There are things you have felt your entire life but struggled to explain. There are truths that arrived as instincts before they arrived as words. There are possibilities within you that the world never gave you a framework for understanding. And because of that, you may have spent years questioning experiences that deserved curiosity rather than doubt. The people who preserved ancient wisdom understood something that modern life often forgets. Human beings contain far more capacity than they usually access. Creativity, intuition, deep insight, pattern recognition, moments of unexpected brilliance. These are not foreign qualities that appear from nowhere. They are part of the architecture already built within us. Yet for many people, those capacities remain untouched. It is like living in a beautiful house while only using a few rooms. Life functions, the essentials are covered, but entire sections remain unexplored. Ancient teachers described those hidden spaces as sealed chambers, gifts waiting in silence, treasures hidden beneath familiarity. They dedicated generations of learning to understanding how those inner doors begin to open. Because the question was never whether the gift existed, the question was how to help someone recognize that it had been there all along. Across generations, different traditions arrived at a surprisingly similar understanding. The deeper parts of a person do not open through effort alone. They do not awaken simply because someone wants them badly enough. There are moments when something shifts internally, when pieces that have existed separately for years suddenly begin working together, and what follows feels less like learning something new and more like remembering something you always knew. People who describe these moments often use different words, yet the experience sounds remarkably familiar. Their minds feel clearer. Connections appear where confusion once lived. The noise that has followed them for years grows quieter, and beneath that silence, they discover something they have been searching for all along. Not a new identity, but a deeper relationship with the one they already possess. Perhaps you have felt glimpses of that yourself. Moments when everything briefly made sense. Moments when insight arrived without struggle. Moments when you felt closer to yourself than usual and wished you could stay there. Those experiences often disappear as quickly as they arrive, yet they leave behind a question that lingers. What if that clarity was never an accident? For centuries, certain forms of knowledge were preserved quietly. They lived inside traditions, practices and teachings that were rarely shared beyond those prepared to receive them. Not because they were meant to exclude people, but because some things require readiness before they can be fully understood. Wisdom has always moved that way. It waits until a person can recognize its value. And now we live in a time when what was once difficult to access has become far more available. The knowledge survived because people carried it forward. Generation after generation, someone protected the flame. Someone preserved the understanding. Someone believed that one day there would be people searching for answers they could not find anywhere else. People much like you. So let me speak directly to you for a moment, not to the role you play in daily life, not to the version of you that handles responsibilities and keeps moving through the world. I am speaking to the quieter part, the part that has endured disappointments, survived losses, and somehow continued believing there was more to your story than what you could currently see. That part of you has been right all along. The version of yourself you have been living is not the whole picture. You have sensed that for years. You may have struggled to explain it. You may have doubted it at times. Yet there has always been a feeling that something important remained unopened, like standing outside a room your soul recognized before your mind understood why. And perhaps that is why these words feel familiar. Many people who experience profound inner shifts describe something interesting. The change is often visible to others before they can fully explain it themselves. The person who spent years feeling unseen begins carrying themselves differently. The one who struggled to express what they felt suddenly finds the words. The one who felt disconnected from purpose begins noticing a thread running through experiences that once seemed unrelated. The transformation is rarely about becoming someone else. It is about gaining access to capacities that were already present. Clearer thinking, deeper creativity, stronger intuition. The ability to see patterns that once felt hidden. A sense that your mind, your heart, and your deeper knowing are finally working together instead of pulling in different directions. Many who study human potential describe this as a state of greater internal coherence. Different parts of the mind begin communicating more effectively, almost as though rooms that were once isolated suddenly have open doors between them. Ideas connect more naturally. Insight arrives more easily. The struggle to force understanding gives way to a quieter form of recognition. And what emerges from that state is not the cold image most people associate with intelligence. It is something more alive than that. It is seeing what was invisible a moment earlier. It is understanding a situation without needing endless analysis. It is sensing the deeper truth beneath appearances. It is recognizing patterns in people, relationships, and life itself that your rational mind alone could never fully explain. Ancient traditions describe this experience in many ways. Some called it awakening. Some called it the opening of the inner eye. Others described it as remembering. The language changed, but the feeling remained the same. Something that had always been present suddenly became visible. The experience itself is not new. Human beings have written about it for centuries. What is changing is access. What was once hidden behind distance, geography, and lineage can now reach people who would never have encountered it before. And that matters because many of the people who need it most are not the ones who have had easy lives. They are the ones who have walked through the fire. They are the ones who kept going when it would have been easier to stop. The ones who carried unanswered questions. The ones who held on through seasons that made no sense. The ones who remained faithful to something they could not fully explain. If that sounds familiar, then hear this carefully. Nothing was wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the confusion, not the years that felt delayed, not the opportunities that disappeared, not the nights when you wondered whether any of it would ever make sense. Every experience has been shaping something within you, even when you could not see it happening. You were never forgotten. You were being prepared. You were being strengthened in places no one else could see. You were becoming the kind of person capable of holding what earlier versions of you would not have been ready to carry. And one day you will look back at seasons that felt empty and realize they were quietly building the foundation beneath everything that comes next. The waiting was never the story. The becoming was. The season of preparation is reaching its completion. What stands in front of you now is bigger than a change in circumstances, bigger than a new opportunity, and bigger than a temporary breakthrough. What is changing is your relationship with yourself. The person waiting on the other side of this moment is not someone new. It is the version of you that has always existed beneath the doubt, beneath the waiting, beneath the limitations you learned to live within. You have carried more inside you than you have ever been able to fully access. You have sensed it in flashes throughout your life. There were moments when insight arrived effortlessly, moments when clarity seemed to appear from nowhere, moments when you felt connected to something deeper and more intelligent than the constant noise of daily life. What has felt occasional begins to become available more consistently. The shift is not merely intellectual, it changes how you move through your days. Ideas connect more naturally. Decisions feel less forced. What once required enormous effort begins to feel strangely intuitive. And often the people around you notice something changing before you find the words to explain it yourself. Yet the most meaningful transformation happens beneath the surface. There comes a point when you stop needing constant reassurance that your purpose is real. You stop arguing yourself back into belief after every difficult season. You stop waiting for the world to validate what your soul has quietly known for years. Instead, a deeper certainty begins to emerge, not loud, not performative, simply present. For generations, ancient teachers describe this as a kind of becoming, a moment when something hidden finally steps into the light, a moment when what has lived in potential begins expressing itself fully. And whether you realized it or not, you have been moving toward that moment for a very long time. Your deepest question has always been the same. You have wondered whether what you feel inside is real. You have wondered whether the longing, the intuition, the sense that there was more to your life than what appeared on the surface could actually be trusted. You have wondered whether the person you secretly believed you could become was ever truly there. The answer has always been yes. What changes now is access. What I'm about to share with you brings together years of study and understanding with insights that have been preserved across generations. It was not created for people looking for entertainment or distraction. It was created for people who are ready to explore capacities they have sensed but never fully reached. People who know there is more within them than they have been able to express. It is called the Genius Switch, and despite the simplicity of the name, the idea behind it is deeply personal. The purpose is not to give you something you do not already possess. The purpose is to help you access what has been there all along, to help quiet the internal noise that makes deeper clarity difficult to hear, to create conditions where your natural creativity, insight and awareness can emerge more freely. The entry point is simple: you listen. Many people describe the experience in surprisingly similar ways. They speak about a new clarity that feels effortless rather than forced. They notice ideas connecting in ways they had never considered before. They describe a quieter mind, a stronger sense of focus, and a feeling that they are finally hearing themselves beneath the noise that once dominated their attention. But perhaps the most meaningful thing they describe is harder to measure. They talk about feeling as though they have returned to something familiar, not discovering a stranger inside themselves, but reconnecting with someone they have known all along. The experience feels less like becoming someone else and more like remembering who they are. That is why this resonates so deeply with so many people. At its best, this process is not about adding something new to your life. It is about removing the distance between you and capacities that have always belonged to you. The creativity that appeared in brief flashes becomes easier to access. The clarity you occasionally experienced becomes more familiar. The ability to recognize patterns, opportunities, and deeper truths begins to feel more natural. Gradually, purpose stops feeling separate from everyday life. Instead of catching brief glimpses of your potential, you begin operating from it more consistently. What once felt fragmented starts feeling integrated. What once felt disconnected begins making sense. The different parts of your life start speaking the same language. This is the possibility waiting on the other side of the door, not fantasy, not wishful thinking. A different way of relating to your own mind, your own gifts, and your own future. A state you have been moving toward through every challenge, every lesson, and every season that shaped you. And that is why the link below matters. Following it is not simply clicking on something, it is making a decision. A decision that says, I am ready to stop standing outside the door. I am ready to explore what I have spent years sensing within myself. I am ready to trust that there is more available to me than I have been living from. That decision carries weight. And there is something else you should know. The Genius Switch was never intended to stand alone. The traditions that inspired this work understood that meaningful transformation happens in layers. Growth unfolds through different dimensions of life, and every layer supports the next. That understanding remains part of what you are about to discover. When you follow the link below this message, you will see that the Genius Switch is only the beginning. The Genius Switch is only one part of a much larger picture. Real growth rarely unfolds through a single doorway, and meaningful transformation almost never happens in just one area of life. The people who carried this wisdom across generations understood that when something awakens within you, it creates movement everywhere else. A shift in awareness changes how you think. A shift in how you think changes how you choose, and the choices you make begin shaping the life that unfolds around you. That is why there are additional tools designed to support different dimensions of the journey. One focuses on vitality, helping restore the sense of mental sharpness, energy, and inner coherence that many people gradually lose while carrying the weight of everyday life. There are people who have spent years feeling mentally exhausted, emotionally drained, or disconnected from the natural energy they once carried. Those who have worked with it often describe feeling more present, more clear, and more alive than they have in a very long time. Another explores the relationship between your gifts and your ability to create stability, opportunity, and flow in the material world. Because one of the deepest frustrations for many people who carry purpose is watching their inner potential feel disconnected from their outer reality. They know they have something meaningful to offer, yet they struggle to create the conditions that allow that gift to flourish. This work is designed to help bridge that gap. A third centers on alignment. Not the kind of alignment people talk about as a trend, but the deeper experience of feeling internally unified. The experience of waking up and feeling less conflicted, less divided between who you are and who you know you could be. Less exhausted from constantly questioning yourself, more connected to a path that feels genuinely yours. These are not separate destinations. They are different expressions of the same deeper movement. They are different doors leading into the same house. Each one supports the process of becoming more fully yourself, and each one becomes available when you step through the door opened by the link below this message. But before we go any further, I want to be completely honest with you. This message is not meant for everyone. It is not meant for people who are still waiting for someone else to define them. It is not meant for people searching for shortcuts around lessons they still need to live through. And it is not meant for people who want transformation without responsibility. This message is for the ones who have already paid attention to the lessons, the ones who have spent years carrying questions, the ones who have survived disappointments that changed them, the ones who have walked through uncertainty, grief, setbacks, and confusion, yet somehow found a way to keep moving. If you have stayed with me this far, there is a reason. Maybe you do not fully understand that reason yet. Maybe part of you is still trying to make sense of why these words feel different. But something inside you recognized this message before your mind finished analyzing it. Recognition often arrives that way, quietly, softly, like a memory you cannot quite place. Like standing near a door and realizing you have been searching for it much longer than you knew. Trust that feeling. The fact that you are here, reading these words at this exact point in your life, carries more meaning than you may currently understand. There are moments that only make sense in hindsight. Moments that seem ordinary until months later when you look back and realize everything started changing there. The link below is where the next chapter begins. And when I say you are ready, I do not mean it as encouragement. I do not mean it as motivation. I mean it as recognition. You have survived experiences that shaped you in ways comfort never could. You have carried burdens that forced you to become stronger, wiser, and more resilient. You have endured seasons that revealed strengths you never knew existed until life asked you to use them. Readiness is not something you need to earn. It is something you need to acknowledge. For too long, you may have been waiting for life to confirm what your heart already knew. You may have been waiting for the perfect sign, the perfect opportunity, the perfect certainty before allowing yourself to fully trust your own path. Yet the people who eventually step into the life meant for them rarely receive certainty first. They receive an invitation, then they choose. That is where you are now. The door is open, the invitation is real. What happens next depends on what you choose to do with this moment, not with some future version of it. Moments like this do not remain unchanged forever. They move, they pass. They ask something of us while they are here, and the people who transform their lives are often the people who respond before every fear has disappeared and before every question has been answered. Before you take your next step, I want you to remember something important. You are not the person you became while trying to survive circumstances that limited you. You are the person those circumstances were preparing. The struggle was never your identity. The preparation was. The waiting was never your identity. The becoming was. Think about that for a moment. How much of your life have you spent defining yourself by the chapter you were in instead of the person you were becoming through it? How many years have you measured yourself by the obstacles rather than the strength those obstacles created? There is a difference, and that difference changes everything. Because the life ahead of you is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to trust who you already are. It is asking you to stop negotiating with your own potential. It is asking you to stop standing outside the door, wondering whether you belong on the other side. You do. That is why the link below matters. Not because something outside of you is about to hand you power. The power was never missing. The gifts were never absent. The deeper intelligence, the intuition, the resilience, the creativity, the insight, the purpose, they have been with you all along. Sometimes all a key does is open a door that was already yours. You are the one who must decide whether to turn it. So if you feel called, follow the link below. Take the step. Give yourself permission to explore what you have sensed beneath the surface of your life for so many years. Trust the part of you that remained alive through every difficult season. Trust the part of you that kept believing there was more, even when the evidence seemed to say otherwise. And before you go, hold this truth close. The power was never somewhere outside of you waiting to be earned. It was never dependent on approval, recognition, perfect timing, or perfect circumstances. The power has been yours from the beginning. What you are stepping toward is not an external gift. It is a reunion, a return, a remembering. Something hidden is becoming visible. Something dormant is becoming active. Something that waited patiently through every chapter of your life is finally ready to be used. And perhaps that is why these words feel so familiar. Not because they are telling you something entirely new, but because they are reminding you of something you have always known. If these words have touched something real inside you, if they have confirmed what part of you has quietly known for years, I want you to leave one word in the comments below. Chosen. Not because a single word changes your life, but because declarations matter. They give form to what has existed silently within us. They transform an inner knowing into something spoken. They mark a threshold. They acknowledge a truth. And if someone in your life comes to mind as you read this, someone who is carrying more than they show, someone who is quietly waiting for their own season of recognition, someone who needs this reminder today, share this message with them. If this message served you, leave a like. Stay connected to this space. What is gathering here is more than content. It is a place where people who have spent years feeling different begin realizing they were never alone. A place where those who have walked difficult roads recognize one another. You did not arrive here by accident. Something in you recognized this moment before your mind could explain it. And now, perhaps, you understand a little more of what it was trying to tell you all along. The door is open. The next step is waiting. And the version of you that has been standing patiently on the other side of that threshold is ready to be met. Every difficult season mattered. Every delay carried meaning. Every chapter that felt confusing was shaping something you could not yet see. Every moment you thought nothing was happening was preparing something beneath the surface. And if you have come this far, then perhaps the most important thing to remember is this. The story was never about what happened to you. It was always about who you were becoming through it. And that becoming is only beginning.